Dieter Bogner is art historian and cultural consultant, and he's the founding president of the Austrian Frederick and Kiesler Foundation. And in the course of his years, I think no one has written or lectured or curated more exhibitions on Kiesler than Dieter has done. And as an integral part of the history of reception of Kiesler, but also with activating his concepts for the here and now, there's no one with similar merits as Dieter. And when I invited him to give a lecture, Dieter hesitated a little bit in the beginning, but then I think the Kiesler poison got reactivated, and he spent several days in the archive, and he really found new things that he's going to share with us today. So thank you very much, and welcome to the...
Yeah. Thank you very much that I can speak in front of the Kiesler community, which I appreciate so many years already, and thank you, Gert, for your short introduction. And I will tell you more about what I found. Okay. For some years now, I have been studying epistemology of the 1970s, called radical constructivism, which was developed by Ernst von Glasersfeld, an US-based scientist who comes from the Austria of the 1920s, just as Kiesler did. His conviction is that man cannot perceive the real world because each individual constructs his own images of the world, unique only to him, from all the phenomena perceived through his senses. The real world is therefore not perceivable. The radical nature of this theory was always and is today highly controversial. Gert Zillner's invitation to prepare a paper for this symposium has been the reason for me to look through many archival boxes to find a link between Kiesler's concept of the vision machine and the theory of Glasersfeld. What I first found in the boxes was a random collection of drawings, texts, reports, letters, advertising materials, etc. I tried to put them in order to get an overview. It was like a puzzle. I could find some surprising connections between drawings and reports, letters and commercial companies' offers, small papers with measurements related to construction details. All these elements were spread over different boxes. The result of this combinatorial work was surprisingly fruitful, and I changed my topic for this lecture. In contrast to the theoretical consideration I had originally in mind to talk about, I want to offer you a first insight into the conceptual genesis of the vision machine on the basis of materials which might have been known but never have been put together chronologically and conceptually. These often visually unattractive materials are the news from the archive of the visionary promised in the title of my lecture. For me, they were really news. I would like to share this story with you in detail because it seems to me to be relevant for the understanding of Kiesler's way of working in the laboratory of design correlation in general and of the vision machine in particular. One outcome of this research might be surprising. The huge plan, which you can see on your left, the huge plan, Lillian Kiesler, many authors and myself called always the vision machine, is not the vision machine. It is only one of several applications of the vision machine proposed by Kiesler around 1940 and 41. But it's not the vision machine itself as a technical and theoretic concept. I therefore focus my reflection on the question on the concept, as I believe, of the real vision machine. Only at the end of my reflections I will come back to my initial question about the epistemological background of the vision machine. First, an example of unspectacular, tiny little papers that contain information about an element made of black granite. Kiesler had asked somebody for the price, and this piece, which he thought to use it for the definition of the border between the external and internal world of the human being, as it is shown in the drawing on your right. The granite, which you can see here. Important are the dimensions given on both papers. From this information, the intended size of the installation can be defined. I will talk later about it. It is, as far as I know, the first estimated possibility to estimate the size of the vision machine planned by Kiesler. With this, I would like just to outline my approach to the archival materials I found. The vision machine, next. The vision machine is meant to be a multimedia installation visualizing the biophysical processes involved in visual perception. Since when, one must ask, has Kiesler been conceiving with concerned with biological issues about the function of the eye, the vision and perception? A first hint offers the two-part paper about the history of photography that Kiesler published in Architectural Record in July and August 1937. One of these illustrations shows a drawing with the figure of a human being which, perceived through an eye, leads to the production of an inner image that is temporarily stored in the brain. Kiesler compares this temporary storage of nature with the more permanent fixation of images in photography and with the long-term storage in fine art, the two other sketches. A pencil drawing in the archive seems to be a preliminary sketch for the publication. Preoccupation with life sciences is not uncommon in the art in the 1930s. Therefore, the question must be asked in each case which issue are at the center. In Kiesler's case, it's the process of visual perception. The publication on the history of photography was published in July 1937, and the drawing was probably made in advance during the spring. The Laboratory for Design Correlation began its activities in fall of 1937. In the report on the first activities in 1937, Kiesler mentions a library project, but not the preoccupation with vision and perception. In the second report of the laboratory for design correlation, covering the period from fall 37 to spring 38, we find the first quotation of the intention to design, I quote, a machine for practical demonstration of optical perception showing the correlative forces of vision. Another page of the report shows a list of names of persons with whom, according to the headline, interviews should be conducted. Some of these interviews were actually held in March and April 38 in relation to the Thomson model. It's written here, the Thomson model. Judging from the headline, I quote, interviews regarding Thomson model, it seems that a student of Kiesler, Thomson, made an initial plan or model for a visualization of the biological principle of seeing. A collaborative working relationship Kiesler with his students is consistent with Kiesler's statement in the first report. I quote, "We can be proud of having worked collectively on problems and by that establishing a sample of goodwill towards each. Such a relationship between students seems to me very important for the productive, unbiased design principles." The interviews with technicians and scientists can be followed relatively precisely, combining dated reports with sketches that are also dated and signed. The glassblower Frank Eck is probably one of the first consultants of Kiesler's project. He sends the team to the chemistry laboratories in the physics building at Columbia University. On this excursion, Kiesler and Thomson are introduced to a new pump that produces bubbles and makes them move in glass tubes. This technique might have interested Kiesler to illustrate dynamic processes. One title of the vision machine is likely to show the use of bubbles. Frank Eck subsequently recommends that Kiesler talks to Professor Colin Fink, also a chemistry engineer. In this conversation, the question of technical visualization of the processes in the brain or in humans is discussed. Fink recommends the use of brass balls combined with an electric generator to produce sparks. However, Fink also demonstrates the possibility of working with neon tubes. Kiesler and Fink each make a sketch. Kiesler records on the drawing shown on your right that it was made by Professor Fink. It's written here, Professor Fink, the date and then the K point of Kiesler. So exactly defined, this is not a drawing by Kiesler, it's a drawing by Fink. This and a number of other drawings automatically so far run under Kiesler's name. In fact, however, these are sketches that were created in the course of the conversations by the interviewed scientists and experts. Kiesler documented the author's name and, above all, dated them correctly, and signed with his famous K point underneath. By linking the drawings with the reports written after the conversation, the development process can be presented in a very informative and lively way. On the basis of the conversation with Fink, Kiesler makes a drawing with brass balls and glass spheres filled with gas and a generator of electricity in the base. It is a sketch signed by Kiesler, and again with the date March 30th, 38. Accordingly, it was created during or directly after the discussion with Professor Fink. At the top right, Kiesler notes the name Professor Fink. This is probably Kiesler's first, known up to today, the first drawing showing the basic function of the vision machine. In a drawing from the same day, dated 30th of March, Kiesler also specifies the results of the conversation with Fink. It shows the relationship described in the report of the brass balls between which sparks move back and forth and glass bulbs that surmount them. Less than 2 weeks after the conversation with Professor Fink, Professor Selig Hecht, a biophysicist at Columbia University, visits Kiesler's laboratory of design correlation to examine technical questions, to examine the purpose of the aesthetic model presented to him. After the earlier discussions about more technical questions, it now concerns the biophysical process of seeing and perceiving. Also of this meeting, a report was written to which drawings from the hand of Professor Hecht can be assigned. In his comment, Hecht urges a clear distinction between the external and internal world of man. This is a conceptual requirement that was to become decisive for the further development of the vision machine. Hecht, in addition to his comments, gives the team a summary of the functionality of the human eye shown on the drawing on your right-hand side. Drawings made by Hecht during the conversation. The report about the conversation on April 11th record at the end the following question of Kiesler, which is essential for the interpretation of the concept of the vision machine. I quote, Mr. Kiesler asked Dr. Hecht, if pictures were produced by the mind and not the eye, whether blind people should see such pictures, whether the blind could see images in dreams. This remark indicates that before the conversation with Hecht, Kiesler was not aware of the importance of the unconscious for the creation of individual images. On April 12th, so the next day, after the conversation with Hecht, Kiesler instructs his student Thompson in a letter, which you can see on the left, to research the literature on blind people and dreams. Kiesler subsequently dealt intensively with the phenomena of image production in blind people, that is, with the individual individual creation, construction of images without impulses from the external world. These considerations are likely to have subsequently influenced the complex visualization in the model of the vision machine of the process taking place in the subconsciousness. On April 25, a second meeting with Professor Hecht takes place in his laboratory. The students, together with Kiesler, receive an introduction to the functionality of the eye. The lecture is given by Dr. Mandelbaum, who also makes several explanatory drawings. Mandelbaum's drawing on the right-hand side. A few days later, after the first meeting with Professor Hecht, Kiesler discusses the technical realization of the vision machine with the engineer Dr. Kaufmann of the BioLight company. In the report of this consultation, detailed technical specifications are recorded. In the course of this conversation, Kaufmann produces a drawing on your right, in which, for the first time, as I have seen it up to now, the wall is depicted as the boundary between the external and the internal world. With this new element, Kiesler follows Professor Hecht's recommendation. Behind this wall, Kaufmann sketches how glass tubes can be used to create different colored circuits that visualize the path of impulses coming from the outside, inside the human being. In the drawing, as well as in the interview summary, among other things, dimensions for the proposed glass tubes are also given. Kaufmann's sketch shows the evolution of Kiesler's drawing made a few weeks earlier. From today's point of view, this drawing can be seen as the first draft of the most important part of the vision machine. Kiesler takes up this scheme sketched by Kaufmann and further develops its sketch by sketch. So the main difference is the wall and more precisely interpretation of the way to explain what happens inside the unconsciousness. The Kiesler archive holds a large number of sketches for the vision machine, all of which are based on the Kaufmann drawing. It will be necessary to work out a conceptual and chronological development for these drawings. It is also important to clarify who made these drawings and who made corrections on them, which you can see in these drawings below. That means somebody was drawing and somebody was doing correction. So again, you can follow the process of development of this installation quite precisely, but it needs further analysis. In the colored pencil drawing, the two colored cycles of glass tubes can be seen in combination with the brass spheres between which sparks are to emerge. So you can see how Kiesler followed the recommendations by technicians and by the biological interpretation of Professor Hecht. The result of these discussions and studies is likely to have been summarized by Kiesler in the sketch on the right. It shows for the first time in the development process described above all details of the technical conception of the vision machine. What I wanted to demonstrate with the detailed sequence of images and text is a complex working process initiated by Kiesler in which technical possibilities and, above all, knowledge of the perceptual process has been developed step by step within about 4 weeks. The process provides a lively insight into the working methods of Kiesler's Laboratory of Design Correlation in 1938. I suppose that the drawing on the right is the result, so it must have been done in spring 38. With all the sequence of dated materials, we have quite a precise date of the production and coming up with this result. It seems that Kiesler had the intention to transform this drawing into a three-dimensional model. The question arises, how large this should have been. A possible answer can be given analyzing the small sketch of the granite wall already shown at the beginning, for which the costs are also shown. The format is given as 80 by 60 centimeter and 7 centimeter thickness. From this, it can be conducted that the installation could have a total height of approximately 1 meter 50, 1 meter 80. So 80 centimeter and the rest which you can see. Accordingly, it could only have been a large model and not the installation envisaged on the large plan of the vision machine, which I have shown at the beginning. From the correspondence with the Dean of the Faculty of Architecture, we can learn that the Dean requested the elaboration of three-dimensional models to use them for the public promotion of the faculty. So he really demands Kiesler do some models, we need them to make propaganda for our faculty. So we can suppose that this was one of these models. Perhaps we find pieces of it once at Columbia. Kiesler may have planned the production of such a model. There are still several indications for this in the archive. A typoscript entitled Vocal Explanation seems to be a functional description of the model of the vision machine designated for the audio explanation integrated into the base of the model. The text describes in detail, or he explains in detail, the path of perception from the apple to the projection of the image produced inside the human eye onto the frosted projected surface inserted between the apple and the eye. It seems to me that the drawing on the left is the only representation of the concept of the vision machine known today. It is the sum of all technical discussions held in the course of March and April '38. The assumption seems justified to place the origin in temporal proximity with the technical discussion during this period. There could well have been further plans, which hopefully we will find in other archives. However, the drawing shows all the main elements of the planned construction. For me, this drawing on the left is the vision machine. Kiesler describes the function of the model on the left as follows. The purpose of our model is to show how we conceive, how we never see, sorry, it's very badly written. No. The purpose of our model is to show how we never see an object as it really exists. Rather, we experience it as filtered through our own personality. The large plan on your right, which I and many other researchers have always called vision machine, is something else, something different. It is one of various concepts for the use of the vision machine, which Kiesler developed during the following years. What you see on the large plan is the concept for an ambitious art exhibition that Kiesler wanted to realize in 1941. The quintessence of this exhibition, with the vision machine in the center, is to locate the process of artist creativity in different phases of the process of perception shown by colored lines. The decoding of the interrelationship between the process of perception and the process of conceiving artworks has still to be done. I tried it, but I didn't have enough time to really unsolve this problem, the relation between Raphael and the perception, between archaeological drawings and perception. It's a lot of work to be done. This exhibition, Kiesler writes, should facilitate the analysis and understanding of the various psychological sources which are the origin of plastic art. So what I read in advance about the drawing of the vision machine, the intention was to show the way of perceiving and not seeing the reality. So this description precisely defines the function for definition how the artwork and perception are connected. In a detailed description of the exhibition concept, Kiesler lists the exhibited works of art from prehistory to Marcel Duchamp, but also images created by children, blind and mentally handicapped persons. Kiesler shows the vision machine at the center of the exhibition, only schematically concentrated on the different phases of perception and not on the technical function. It must have been much larger than the model from 1938. The idea was that visitors enter into the large exhibition hall through an entrance and follow an audiovisual demonstration sitting on steps of the auditorium. The entrance and the auditorium. It looks a little like the Gläserner Mensch in Dresden. I don't know if you knew it, but it was the same setting. The Kiesler Archive holds a number of conceptual drawings for this exhibition project and many theoretical texts. The evaluation of these materials has still to be done. In 1941, Kiesler proposes an estimate for the planning and construction of the exhibition, and he appoints an advisory board. There are a lot of letters and texts where he really wanted to realize this huge installation, but as we know, it never came up. But how did Kiesler come up with the idea of using the vision machine to demonstrate different processes of artistic creation? A first indication of a conceptual connection of the vision machine with the production of artworks I found at the end of the vocal explanation, the text, in addition to the vision machine of 38, of the vision machine mentioned earlier. Kiesler has learned from the experts that human beings transform the object of the outside world into individual images in the mind. He describes his idea as follows. It is by this projection that different people see the same object differently. To show this to you, we will project the reactions of 4 different people to our apple. Let us see how Cézanne would see it, how Raphael would see it, etc. However, as example for the individuality of the production of the picture in the head of human beings, he does not refer to the view of anonymous persons, but, so it is to be assumed, intends to use the representation of an apple painted by Cézanne, Raphael, and other artists. I do not want to analyze the meaningfulness of these considerations, but this is a first indication of Kiesler's conception of an exhibition as an explicative model of artistic creativity. A technical drawing shows a projector that can display 4 images that should change at intervals of 3 to 5 seconds. They are projected onto a surface made of frosted glass, positioned between the real object and the eye. The detail represented represents the central idea of the vision machine, to transmit the absolute individuality of image production and the impossibility of perceiving reality. Here this detail and here. So the conceptual drawings and the whole installation are in all details planned before and put together to one. We can never see the world as it really is. It is one of the basic comments to what he was planning here. Kiesler explains, the purpose of our model is to show how we never see an object as it really exists. Rather, we experience it as filtered through our own personality. The plan on the object image is between the real object and the human being. It never coincides with the object itself. It does not appear either in the eye or in the brain or in any region of the human body at any time. Its screen or plane lies between, way from object to man. If we cannot recognize the apple as a real object, but only a picture of it, constructed from our memories, as well as physiological in psychological processes, and if every man produces a different picture in each case on the basis of his individual experience and sensitivities, then the conclusion is to be drawn from this that the recognition of reality is fundamentally not possible for man. The world is for him only that what he can take in his senses and process in his insight to a construction of the world. What the world really is remains close to man. Kiesler, as far as I know his text, dealt with this philosophical question only marginally, for example, with a reference to Kant. This epistemological problem was dealt with some decades later, in the 70s, as I said at the beginning, by Ernst von Clausewitz, questioning the possibility of human acquisition of knowledge. His conviction of the impossibility of any knowledge of the real world, known as radical constructivism, has led to hot debates since the 70s. Clausewitz draws primarily on the Geneva biologist Jean Piaget, who has been working on a genetic epistemology deeply rooted in biology since the late 1930s, that is, in parallel with Kiesler's vision machine. More generally, Clausewitz shows in his publication that his reflections are in continuity of a model of thought that can be tracked back to antiquity. A very general definition of the theory is quite similar to Kiesler. I quote Kiesler, that the perception does not provide an image of reality independent of consciousness, but that reality for each individual is always a construction from sensory stimuli and memory performance. Therefore, objectivity in the sense of correspondence between perceived, constructed image and reality is impossible. Every perception is completely subjective, so Clausewitz. In this sense, this was Kiesler, in this sense, Ernst von Clausewitz formulates, there is no knowledge of an independently existing ontological reality, nor is such knowledge necessary. These aspects of the vision machine raise the question of the intellectual sources Kiesler used. The philosophical discourse of the time in New York, to which Kiesler has access, remains to be researched. The bibliographies his students put together and many theoretical typoscript he wrote in this time have to be analyzed and must be integrated into the conceptual development of the vision machine from the beginning of the 1930s to the early, from the end of the 1930s to the beginning of 1940s. Thus, there's still much work to be done to understand the concept of vision machine and its use for both perceptual and educational purposes. And finally, one most interesting line of inquiry. There is no relationship between Kiesler's and Paul Virilio's concept of, he wrote the text, vision machine. But it might be interesting to compare Kiesler's reflection of the late 30s with Virilio's text of the 1990s, which deals with the possibility, the future possibility, and the consequences of, I quote, delegating the analysis of objective reality to machines. I thank you for your patience with presenting you a lot of unspectacular stuff and a lot of open questions. But I hope I have at least been able to bring some light into the history, the creation of the vision machine. And finally, I would like to express my vision that in foreseeable future, a comprehensive publication, at least 200 pages, about the manifold practical and theoretical aspects of vision machine will appear. Who will do it? I'm sure it will pay off. Thank you very much.